What's going on, everyone? This is Nick Yuskevich of Daily Fantasy Winners, bringing you an episode of Tee to Green, and this is the Part 2 edition of this U.S. Open preview, getting ready for Oakmont Country Club, one of the toughest tests in golf. So this is the picks video. If you have not seen Part 1, is the general overview of the U.S. Open. It has a lot of things to do with the details in Oakmont Country Club, as well as some things strategy-wise and getting ready for DraftKings' Millionaire Maker. But this is the picks video. But I highly recommend you go check out Part 1 if you haven't seen it. You can go find it on DailyFantasyWinners.com. You can find it on our YouTube channel as well. Okay, so for the picks, if I do not list somebody in this video, that doesn't mean I don't like them necessarily. These are just my favorite plays at essentially each price point. I'm doing it this way because some people will make one or two lineups, and some people will make the max 200 when it comes to the Millionaire Maker. So if you are making the max 200, I will have recommended ownerships, like I usually do for all the majors, on the forum on DailyFantasyWinners.com in the PGA section. I will also add some more things there that I definitely think will help strategy-wise. I've been doing research pretty much nonstop over the last couple of days, going back to this weekend, and it includes listening and research, listening to some other podcasts and videos. And I think there's some misleading information out there, quite frankly, a little bit. So I would definitely go there for some discussion. I picked up on some things strategy-wise that I think will help here over just the last couple days since I've done Part 1. Also to clear up a couple things from Part 1, but even talk about some of the misleading things as well out there in some of the other platforms. So in any case, we can talk about that there, but let's just dive in right into the picks. Top plays. Starts at the most expensive player, Jason Day, $12,100. Jason is better than Rory, and he is better than Jordan. And I think there's this public notion a little bit that everybody wants to see this big three, so to speak. I honestly think Jason is better than them, and I don't want to go as far as maybe to say it's not even close, but I do think there is a noteworthy gap there. I'll put it that way. Jason is basically the best as far as statistically go. There's not one hole in his game. I absolutely love the fact that he will be able to hit 2-iron on this golf course a lot, as far as a lot of people hit their drivers in 3-woods, and he's very accurate with it. If you take a look at his U.S. Open history, he has made all 5 cuts that he's played in here at the Open. He has 4 top 10s out of the 5 U.S. Opens he's played, and 3 of those finishes are 4th, 2nd, and 2nd. And, so it's obviously Jason has been extremely good in U.S. Opens here in his very young career. Best stats all around, best player in the game. He's doing Tiger Woods type of stuff right now and I'm not talking about recent Tiger Woods, I'm talking about Tiger Woods back in the early mid-2000s. So again, it's how Jason's playing right now, and I absolutely love it. So I would definitely roster Jason. He will probably be owned in the 20 to 25% range in the Millionaire Maker, but honestly, that's not that high for somebody for Jason Day in terms of the way he's priced, and he should be owned higher than that. So let's move on now to the next person. This is Dustin Johnson, $11,000. This is another player that will probably be owned a decent amount, gained some popularity here, but he is really good on tough golf courses. He's been outstanding all around this year, but particularly the one thing I love about Dustin is that he's dramatically improved his approach game. He's still not the greatest scrambler in the world, but he has improved his approach game a lot and worked on it a lot in the offseason. I think that's really paying dividends. His driver's been outstanding. He's been accurate with it. He can tee off with an iron and has no problem doing that. It's a great fit. And again, there are times it is good to fade sometimes or limit your exposure a lot to some of the players that will be really highly owned. But when they fit the golf course really well, but more importantly, they're the most expensive players when they do have the highest floors, I think it's okay to go ahead with some of these star players. It's just more when you use the stars, you don't want to use them with a bunch of highly owned middle of the road price players, like in the 8, 7, 6K range type of a thing. So it's okay to use those two guys, but just make sure you're going to use some guys that are not going to be 15, 20% owned in the 7K range. That would be bad. So in any case, we're moving on here. The next couple golfers are $10,100 and $9,800, and they both are for very similar reasons why I like them. Adam Scott and Hideki Matsuyama. They are outstanding tee to green players. They are some of the best ball strikers that we have in the game right now. The one weakness of each player right now is their putter, which is actually the least important thing for this golf course. I will dive into one of the strategy things here. A lot of people think that the U.S. Open and Oakmont putting is the big key because the greens are difficult and, everyone thinks of U.S. Open, making pars, making those tough 6 to 8 footers per par type of thing. If you go back and look at previous U.S. Opens and look at, because right now we have the new statistics on PGAtour.com, strokes gained tee to green, or excuse me, strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approaching the green, strokes gained around the green, and strokes gained putting. If you look at the winners and some of the top names, the players near the top of the leaderboard of the last 10 U.S. Opens, by far the least important statistics in the strokes gained category is putting. And that was true back in 2007. When Angel Cabrera won the U.S. Open here in 07, he specifically had said, and paraphrasing here again a little bit, I'm repeating myself a little bit from part one, but he did say that the greens were so difficult that it actually evened out the playing field in the putting department because nobody could get a really good feel for them. And it brought the competition back a little bit toward him as far as the putting department goes. Ernie Els, historically not that great of a putter as well. He won it in 94. So it's kind of a history here, so to speak. So I really like the way Scott and Matsuyama fit here. I don't think either of them are going to be that highly owned as well, because so I think you're going to be well off there. The next two players I will bring up are a couple European players that are actually very much back-to-back price points. Henrik Stenson at 9,100 and Sergio Garcia at 8,900. For Henrik Stenson at 9,100, he is simply too cheap. There is no hole in his game. He is outstanding tee to green, and I think the 3-wood off the tee is absolutely perfect for his game here. And Stenson burned definitely some people at the Players' Championship, and he still has about as good as I mean, he's not the upside of the very top players, but he is definitely the best upside by far of anybody, I think, around like $9,000. And I think he's, quite frankly, just underpriced as a result. And he still has a very high floor as well. And I don't think he'll be that highly owned to boot as well. Then you take a look at Sergio Garcia at 8,900. Most people knock Sergio, and whatever reason you have, that's fine. I don't care. But it's like the public perception of Sergio, he's like, he just can't win a major. And, you know, he's like, he's pretty much out of time at this point. Sergio's still playing outstanding golf, and he's really good at tee to green. And if you go look specifically at his U.S. Open history, it is actually much better than you think. And he's shown great consistency at U.S. Open, and he's really good on tough golf courses. And again, like Scott and Matsuyama, the one weakness of Sergio historically is the putter, and I think that is actually the two weaknesses. The one area that's not the most important is where his one weakness is. So I think that's a nice little fit there. And again, I don't think Sergio will be owned that highly again as well. So moving on now down to the kind of around the low 8,000 range. There's actually three names around here, and again that I like that are all consecutively named, I believe, in a row on DraftKings. So we've got Louis Oosthuizen, Brooks Koepka, and Brandt Snedeker, 8,200, 8,100, and 8,000 respectively. Starting with Oosthuizen, he's way too cheap. For what he has done in major championships in the past, I actually kind of feel like South Africans at the sports books get slightly disrespected a little bit, and they usually give pretty good odds. So Oosthuizen, I think, is good. He is generally really good on tough golf courses, but he's also generally really good in tough conditions. If you take a look at some of his past major championship results, he's overcome a lot of kind of BS and adversity for some of his best rounds. You take a look at like the Open Championship last year. He was the person that when they sent the group back out, I believe it was on Saturday in day 3, he put his ball down and the wind was howling, a bajillion miles an hour. He put his ball down, pulled away the marker, and the ball just rolled, like the wind gust just picked up and his ball like blew several feet away from the hole. And so in any case, you kind of get the idea that I'm here. And Oosthuizen played through one of the worst tee time waves, the worst of the two tee time waves at last year's Open Championship, was able to get to a playoff, eventually lost to Zach and Leishman. But in any case, nevertheless, Oosthuizen has a very good history of tough golf courses. Again, very good tee to green, and just too cheap here. And so that's just one example with the Open Championship last year. Brooks Koepka at 8,100. He will probably be pretty highly owned. So I would definitely be cautious if you're just making a few lineups here. You don't have to worry about the ownership quite as much. But nevertheless, I would not pair Koepka with a bunch of other highly owned players that are expected to be fairly highly owned. I'll get a little bit more into all the guys that should be highly owned on the Daily Fantasy Winners forum, like a guy like Daniel Berger, who should be really highly owned, coming off a win and has insane odds per dollar. So we'll get more into that later. But Koepka, I think he's an outstanding course fit here. I'd be shocked actually if he wasn't in contention. He should certainly make the cut, but I would be I'm expecting him to be in contention at least. He's usually pretty good on tougher golf courses, and he's usually been pretty good here at the U.S. Open in his young career. And so lastly, Brandt Snedeker at 8K. His last 5 U.S. Opens: 8th, tied for 9th, tied for 17th, tied for 11th, tied for 8th. That's outstanding. He is certainly underpriced, in my opinion, 8K. He should have been more in the upper 8,000 range, maybe mid 8,000 range at the absolute worst. He is quietly still very dangerous. I don't think he'll be that highly owned, just given some of the names that are around him. There are a lot of players at this price point. I think you're going to get some great ownership value and just great value overall on Brandt Snedeker, and I think he's got good odds at the sports books too, quite frankly. I'll just throw that in there. So, just a great all-around game, of course. So, Charles Schwartzel at 7,500, another South African. Way too underpriced at 7,500. There is some possible high ownership here as well. I'll throw that in there, but it shouldn't be quite as bad as Koepka. I think it'll be a little bit lower than him. But in any case, Schwartzel is somebody that is very high upside. He has a pretty high floor as well. I just think he's way underpriced, and I think you're just getting great value. It really, quite frankly, is that simple when it comes to Schwartzel, and I don't really get why he's that cheap. And especially when you take a look at his specific history in majors, it's very good as well. All right, let's move down a little bit here to the low 7,000 range and the upper 6,000 range. We've got a few names, several names in here, quite frankly, we've got to get through. Matthew Fitzpatrick at 7,300. A bit of a shorter hitter, but there's really no hole in his game, and he has tremendous upside, and he has an extremely bright future. He is only 21 years old, and somehow, a lot of people really don't know a lot about him still, even though he just won a tournament over on the European Tour. So even though the DraftKings has started the European Tour events, he'll be a little bit more known than he was as of a few weeks ago. But nevertheless, Fitzpatrick, I still think, is a tremendous fit here, and he's shown great results here. He had a top 10 at the Masters here just earlier this year, and he made the cut at his one U.S. Open a couple of years ago when he was an amateur. So good signs here from Fitzpatrick. I think you're getting some good value here from what upside he can potentially bring. 7,300, another guy, Billy Horschel. Contrary to popular belief of Billy Horschel, he tends to do well on tougher golf courses and in tough fields. And a lot of people think he's kind of a blow-up candidate because he wears his emotions on his sleeves. But that just because somebody wears their emotions on their sleeves, he doesn't necessarily blow up. He actually played really well at Chambers Bay last year, even though he went off on the USGA and was kind of doing his little antics on the green where he was making fun of his putts with the golf balls, zigzagging around and hopping around the Poa annua and kind of playing to the crowd a little bit. And yeah, he wears his anger and emotions on his sleeves, but that doesn't mean he's out of control and blows up necessarily. He actually, if you look at the data, he does a little bit better on some of the tougher courses and tougher fields. So I actually think Horschel is a great option here and very good tee to green for this golf course. Moving on down to $7,000 now, Webb Simpson. Traditionally outstanding tee to green. Putter is another story, but that's, again, kind of a good fit here for this golf course, and he's actually just quietly playing fairly well on tour this year. And again, Webb Simpson, someone who's made the last couple Ryder Cup teams, a former U.S. Open champ at Olympic 4 years ago in 2012. So, Simpson's got some really good history at major championships, and so even though he's not kind of maybe the caliber of a player that some people maybe expected him to be, he's still a pretty darn good player, and I think he's a good fit here for the U.S. Open. Moving on to 6,900, Emiliano Grillo. Again, I think you're kind of getting the theme here. I've picked Grillo a lot each week, and the Memorial is just beginning to scratching the surface for him, even though he faded down the stretch, certainly. A younger guy, and I would certainly buy stock in him right now, just, theoretically speaking. Grillo is somebody who's going to be, I think, a pretty good star on this tour. Maybe not Jason Day caliber right now where he is, but he's got some outstanding upside. I think he's going to be a name to be reckoned with, and you should jump on him while you can. Rafa Cabrera-Bello at 6,800, very underpriced at 6,800, and not the best odds per dollar, which I was pleasantly surprised to see. Awesome tee to green game, and still not known by a ton of people still. And again, and for those of you that play daily fantasy golf each week, some of these names I'm saying aren't that widely known. But just keep in mind, again, this is the Millionaire Maker, and with hundreds of thousands of entries, we got, and a max of 200 because the max doesn't change, we have a lot more public players in this and a lot more casual players, fans of golf. So they're not going to know some of these players. And this is actually a good reminder just to throw this in, and I'll talk about this a little bit more on the forum. It's kind of a good idea to focus maybe a tiny bit more on some of your cheaper options, on some more of the unknown international players. If you do a little research, it's very good to see that, because there are some sneaky international picks as well that might be good to throw in a lineup here and there if you're making in several of them, because they're going to have some low ownership, and the American players will be owned a little bit higher when it comes to the cheaper guys, because there's more data to go off, and they just, quite frankly, know them a little bit more. And then the last name to wrap this up at 6,800 is somebody that could be decently owned, certainly, and that is Danny Lee. He has been very good since he switched caddies before the Masters. I think he missed one cut at the RBC, but other than that, he's been very solid with several top 20 finishes, and he's got better upside than you think when it comes to major championships, because he's done very well in some good fields this year as well, and you're simply getting good value there. So again, a little bit of an ownership concern at 6,800, but I don't think it's going to be too outrageous that you don't have to be overly over the top worried about it. So that is it. There are definitely some cheaper players that I like, but there is kind of a bit of a drop off here in talent, in my estimation, in terms of and what I would potentially do for ownership. So check out DailyFantasyWinners.com, into the forum, PGA section again, for all the players in the field and for recommended ownerships, and how much I and the rest of the people at Daily Fantasy Winners, like some of the players that just simply were not mentioned in this video. And so that's it. Please remember, like and subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels. We always really appreciate it. The more people, the better. We're doing good with that. We want to keep it going. And of course, you can always follow me on Twitter at @NickySkevich. I'm going to be tweeting a lot about the U.S. Open this week. Pretty much just golf and baseball coming up here. So that's pretty much all the college football preseason stuff. So that's pretty much all I'll be talking about right now. But a lot of golf stuff coming up. So it'll be the majority of that coming up. And so Nicky Skevich on Twitter, and you can follow Daily Fantasy Winners at DFSnerd on Twitter. Okay, everyone, good luck.